Hello, everybody.
Oh, nice.
You can see, okay, I think the the slot just after lunch is the worst slot that any speaker can have, and I seem to get every time this slot. So I don't know why. Hopefully, I'll interest you and stay awake. I'm going to talk about intermittent fasting, hormesis, and adaptive responses. When we talk about dietary restriction, what it is basically is a kind of stress for the organism, mild stress, with the aim to upregulate any damage and repair damage that seems to be present due to aging or due to other causes. So the general idea is to cause mild stress to the body and so increase resilience and improve health and function. So one of these kind of stresses, positive stress, is intermittent fasting. This is a positive nutritional test, and generally, in general terms, is a good thing to have. But this stress has to be within certain limits. We cannot have too much of it or too little of it. And here is when the concept of hormesis comes in. Hormesis is found in many biological areas. Basically, what it is exposure to mild stress or a toxin or a damaging event that has to be mild, stimulates the adaptive beneficial effects for the body, the, the cellular stress response, and so the body becomes stronger. The biological mechanisms involved in this hormetic phenomenon include improvement of antioxidant activity, modulation of autophagy and apoptosis. And I talk about modulation because it is not increasing it or decreasing it. If it's too high, it increases this. If it's too low, it increases it. So that's the modulation aspect of autophagy and apoptosis. And other beneficial effects like cell signaling and improved function of the gut microbiota. So as a result of this mild exposure to damage, we have improvement of different biological areas, and the organism becomes better able to cope with a more stressful event in the future. You can see from the image here, if there is no stress to start off with, and then we are exposed to sudden stress, then there is cellular damage. But if we have the hormetic response before, in other words, if we train our body to respond well to the damaging effect, then there is survival of the cell and better health. Examples of hormesis are physical exercises. When we go to the gym and we do exercises, basically what we do is put our muscles and skeletal system under mild stress. And this makes us stronger. The same with brain exercises, keeping our brain active with mental exercises. We have nutritional stress, nutritional hormesis like calorie restriction, intermittent fasting, and exposure to physical agents, mild heat like sauna or cold, or even mild poisons like arsenic. All of these have been shown to have beneficial effects for the organism if they are within the hormetic window. And we even have social hormesis when we take part in the social environment around us, or sexual hormesis, which may upregulate several sexual hormones and other beneficial effects of the brain and on the body. When we talk about intermittent, this is a general term, not only for intermittent fasting, but it is a term which shows that the stress, the exposure to the stimulus, is not regular or monotonous, it's changing all the time. And this can be applied not only in the nutritional area, but also in other aspects of our life. So in general, it's a good idea to advise people to lead an intermittent exposure to test to any bad stimuli, like intermittent exercise, sometimes too much, sometimes too little, sometimes medium, intermittent fasting, intermittent exposure to cognitive stimulation, and so on. Intermittent is good because it activates hormesis. When we come to intermittent fasting, there are different ways of using this technique. I'm not going to go into big details, but some people fast for 2 days in a week and eat normally the rest of the time. Others fast every other day. Others fast for 16 hours, fast without eating anything, with water only, and 8 hours they can eat as normal. It doesn't mean that they eat for 8 hours, but they eat as normal. And this creates a mild stress to the body. So it stimulates the body to have resources from reproduction to somatic maintenance, in other words, making us stronger and healthier. But apart from the action itself, apart from doing the intermittent fasting, the ingredients of the diet are relevant too. So we have a combination of the practice of intermittent fasting plus choosing to have certain ingredients which act in a hormetic way to stimulate cellular stress response. And examples I mentioned here, for example, dark chocolate, spices. We have the resveratrol, well known from red grapes and berries, and several other ingredients which may be beneficial for somebody who is practicing intermittent fasting. Now, for people who do not want to fast, the same we have with calorie restriction. There are people who do not want to follow a calorie restriction diet. We have the mimetics, which are compounds, chemicals, or nutrients or molecules, which mimic the biological and biochemical effects of the calorie restriction or intermittent fasting. So during intermittent fasting, we have activation of certain pathways, which same pathways may be activated by nutrients. So people who do not want to do the diet, they can choose, in theory I'm talking, they can choose these mimetics, which have similar effects as the action itself. And the most well-studied are resveratrol, oxaloacetate, deoxyglucose. And you can see here, there are exercise mimetics as well. So people who do not want to exercise, they may choose certain chemicals which mimic the effects of exercise. This is just to show you that biological actions are universal. It can be activated by the action itself, by the lifestyle, or through chemicals or nutrients. And in theory, they have the same effects. They have improvement of lifespan, health span, and prevention of diseases. And I will show you these examples here to show that there are many calorie restriction mimetics. I'm not going to go through everything, but just to show that there is intense research in this area. And maybe people who want to look into this in more detail and see use combinations of these mimetics like rapamycin and metformin, they could get the same effects as the calorie restriction or the intermittent fasting itself. And before I move on, I'll just tell you that there are not only nutritional mimetics, but also exercise mimetics I mentioned before. You may get some of the effects of some of the benefits of exercise just by taking certain nutrients. and they are also sex mimetics. We did some research showing that during sex there is production of certain chemicals and certain biochemical situations, which can be mimicked by taking a number of tablets. So you get the same benefit of the organism as the action, in this case, the sexual action itself. But intermittent fasting has a beneficial effect on the gut microbiota. We know that the gut microbiome has many effects on health, and its function diminishes with aging. So it's important to keep it in good health. And it also affects, in my opinion, most importantly, the brain and the function of the brain. So it's important to have it in good state. So intermittent fasting, if done properly, can stimulate the function of microbiota, and that makes the bacteria in our intestines produce certain metabolites which act in a hormetic way. So we have a double effect here. These metabolites stimulate the organism to respond to the challenge and create improved adaptation and robustness. Now we come to something quite important, because it's something that not many people or anti-aging specialists or biogerontologists discuss, is our environment, the digital environment. We all live, and the example is just now, you all sit there in your screens or in the theater, listening to me in a digital way. You don't see me as a person. So all this digital information goes to your brain. The neuron cells, the neurons have to assimilate this information. And I'm talking about information that requires action, not trivial information. So important information has to be assimilated in our brain. And intermittent fasting helps in this respect. Improves, for example, BDNF and other neurotrophic factors, stabilizes insulin, and this plays a role in as source of energy during demanding cognitive tasks. And intermittent fasting also reduces oxidative stress in the brain. So the combination of intermittent fasting and living in a digital society with information that makes us act is something that we have to study more. And the reason I'm saying this is that if you think about it, when we do intermittent fasting, we are stimulating the organism to respond to the stress and activate certain biochemical pathways which are beneficial. But if at the same time we live in a cognitive, digital, technological society, this by itself stimulates the brain to create the same chemicals or compounds. And in this way, we have double the stimulation. So we have two good stimulations, the intermittent fasting, which is good, and the exposure to digital information, which is seen as a challenging stimulus by the brain, which is still good. But the addition of these two good stresses, maybe it will give us a negative situation, because it'll be too much. In other words, we'll have too much stimulation by doing two good things. We have to be careful with that, to not overshoot the therapeutic hormetic window and stay within the beneficial effect. And the general way to think about this is by seeing whether you feel comfortable or uncomfortable with the stimulation. If you feel comfortable with any stimulation, it means that it is good and hormetic and adaptive. If you feel uncomfortable, it means it's too much and you should stop it. So in conclusion, we've seen that intermittent fasting should be within hormetic principles. In other words, not too much and not too little, but within a certain limit. Improves adaptation to stress. And there are different biological mechanisms like modulation of autophagy and DNA repair and so on. And we have the mimetics of intermittent fasting, compounds or chemicals which reproduce or mimic some of the physiological effects of the action. And the combination of intermittent fasting with exposure to the technological environment should be done with care in order not to overshoot the beneficial window that is adaptive for ourselves. And this is, in general terms, what I was going to say. And here is me practicing intermittent fasting using a digital device. In other words, reinforcing what I told you, that everything should be in moderation. Even if you do two good things, they don't always amount to one good thing. They may amount to a negative thing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Marios. Any questions?
I have a question about prolonged fasting. Does prolonged fasting has significant higher effect of what you was talking over the intermittent fasting? And second question, if there are some biofeedback devices and options for biofeedback devices which can track the effect of intermittent and prolonged fasting to give person alert that fasting came to some stage which is dangerous.
We cannot give individual advice for every person. Some people may get a lot of benefit by prolonged fasting. Others may not. For example, myself, I cannot do prolonged fasting. If I do prolonged fasting, I'll get negative effects. It depends on your own personality and on your own organism. And this you can judge from your own feelings. If you do prolonged fasting and you feel okay with it, it means that it's good for you. If you feel very uncomfortable and unwell and vomiting and have headaches, it means that it's not good for you, and you should do a less prolonged period. Biofeedback devices there exist, but I don't trust them too much because there are so many effects that change in our body that cannot be measured by a single device. So basically, it's an individual advice, individual person, and also it could be okay for you for many weeks, and then you'll find suddenly that if you continue doing prolonged fasting, that it will not suit you. We change with time. So I advise personally to see what works for you.
More questions?
Do you have any data or knowledge about exposure to low level of radiation or energy? And if it also creates the positive effect on the body? It can be from sunscreen to sun exposure, ultrasound, even low level of radiation. Is there any data about it?
Yes. In fact, the whole chapter of hormesis started with the study of radiation, the effects of radiation on the body. And there are many, many studies which show that certain low-level types of radiation are beneficial to the body. There is quite a lot of discussion about X-rays and MRIs and so on, whether they are beneficial or not. But up to certain limits, including electromagnetic radiation, radiation emitted from laptops or mobile phones, if it is within a certain limit, then it's beneficial. It's better to have it than not to have it at all. And if you are interested, there are many studies which set the limits for this radiation. It's a complex area, but basically any type of stimulation within a certain limit is good, including radiation, including poisons.
Thank you, Maria, for your interesting report.